How's it going, everyone? So there's been some big changes on the Trading212 platform, and it's great news out there for anyone who wants to automate the process of investing even more. So we can see we're currently on the investments tab, and that just lists out all the individual stocks that we have currently invested in, but we now have access to the pies tab. And so this video is going to be talking about why the pies tab is useful and how this benefits us as investors on the Trading212 platform. So when you start off, you don't have any of the lists that you can see on my screen. I have manually created the bonds, consumer, ETFs, etc. But I just want to go through the process. So hitting the plus tab, we can add individual stocks or ETFs or just search for them. And so I want to build up a pie that consists of tech-based companies. Now I can add companies that I've previously invested into individually, or companies that I plan on investing in the future. So I'm going to add a couple of companies. These are all companies that I have already invested in. So let's add Intel as well. So I've added 3 tech-based companies, and we can see that we have a breakdown right at the bottom here. And so if I hit the next button, we can now add a weight to individual companies as to how much we want to invest. So this is where the fun begins. For each company, we can supply a weighting. Now there's no right or wrong answers here. We have some form of guidance to show what our expected annual return is, but I wouldn't worry too much about trying to maximize the annual return value. So to begin with, you want to add a few companies, and we need to make sure that these percentages add to 100%. We can see right now I'm over by 19%. Now when you just have a few companies, you can generally give an equal weighting, and by default that is what was provided for me. So when you add companies to your pie, I wouldn't worry about providing the weighting until you've added all the companies, because if you add one or more new companies, you need to adjust the weighting. So first and foremost, make sure you have a given sector in mind, and for instance I'm focusing on the technology-based sector, and I'm trying as best as possible to add the companies that I wish to. Now of course I've only added 3 companies, I plan on adding more in the future, but this is just for demo purposes. So once you provide the weighting that you are happy with, hit next, and you have 2 options. You can either auto invest, or you can manually supply the funds from your account. Now there's options to change this later on, but if I click on the auto invest, I just want to show how that looks. So what happens is we have a time frame in the number of years, we have a monthly contribution each time, and the initial deposit. So when you change these values, you can see how much of a projection you are estimated to receive. So again, you have the ability to customize how long you want to be invested within a given pie. So if you're a long-term investor, you can max out the number of years, and you can decide on how much of a deposit you want to provide to this pie on a monthly basis. Now for now, I'm not actually going to deal with the auto invest. I'm just going to have it manually configured. That allows me to go back and reassess what weightings and which companies I want to add. And so now I'm just going to provide a name for this pie, which is technology. You can, if you wish, change the icon. Now the images supplied for this beta version is absolutely terrible, so I'm not going to select any icons there. I'm just going to use the current image, which provides a weighting for the different companies, and that's good enough. So we can create that pie, and we have this pie added with all the other ones that I pre-added earlier. So let's talk about the positives of what this gives us. We can now group similar based companies together, and Trading212 uses the term pies. Other companies out there use terms such as slices, but they're pretty much the same thing. They allow you to group companies based on a given sector. Now one thing to call out is when we go on the given pie, we can actually see that we have dividend income listed. So any companies that provide us with dividends, we have the ability to have the dividends reinvested. Now, although I haven't tested this as of yet, my assumption is that any dividends that come from the given holdings, so let's say we have a payout of Intel, Microsoft, Apple, those dividends will all be collected, but depending on the weight that you allocate, the dividends will be split according. Now, of course, if you have an equal weighting balance, which I pretty much have, then those dividends will be split equally. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But it's great because we can actually split out those dividends to a range of companies within the given pie, whereas in the past we just received dividends from a given company and then that is added to our remaining balance. So we can see here I have free funds of £240. So for companies that are not connected to a pie, those dividends are not automatically reinvested. So for a dividend investor like myself, this feature has definitely been geared towards us, which is great to see from Trading212. I mentioned in previous videos that I felt as though the Trading212 platform didn't start with a dividend-based investor in mind, but given there's other companies out there that operate in this style, we are starting to see some of those feature benefits come to Trading212. So this makes the process of automated investing a lot more easier. At the moment, there's still been a manual process from receiving your funds and then reinvesting. The decision-making process has somewhat been taken away should we wish to, but these are companies that we wish to add to our pies, and so we shouldn't have an issue with investing in companies that we plan on investing into anyway. Now, with respect to the weighting, there's a lot of freedom, and so you'll have to come up with a weighting that makes sense for you, and keep in mind that you can adjust the weighting as time progresses. Now, something to call out is that when you are actually actively investing, you have the option to rebalance. Now, this can be somewhat dangerous because if you have a given company with a higher weighting and you want to lower that weighting, then what can happen is shares that you had in the company will be sold. Now, there is a warning page to say how many shares are estimated to be sold, but for the most part, I would advise that you try and get the percentages as correct as possible so that in the future you don't have to sell out of existing positions. So we can see I have all these different pies. So I've got my bonds, customer, ETFs, etc. But we can see there's no weighting assigned to those. Now, an ideal situation would be that I create one pie and that tracks all of these ones listed. And that way I can supply a weighting, perhaps 20% bonds, 30% consumer. Now, Trading212 is aware that this feature is unavailable and apparently they are working to introduce this, which would be great. Now, this is really important for a diverse portfolio because, in my opinion, I want to provide a higher weighting to real estate compared to that of, say, bonds. Now, I've mentioned that it's great to have all this flexibility. So when I go onto the individual companies, I can supply weightings, etc. That gives me really great freedom. But at the same time, it can be very scary for a beginner investor. So some questions you'll have is, what kind of percentage should I provide to these companies? And for a beginner investor, maybe you should stay away from deciding what weighting to pick. At the same time, it's not an exact science. If you favor a given company, then feel free to supply more of a weighting. Now, before anyone tries to copy what I have, right now, until I start actually investing, all these weightings will be adjusted in the future. So just to call that out as well. Now, one thing I noticed was that when I created a new pie, as I did earlier, it was sometimes difficult to find even existing companies that I've already invested in. And there were some UK-based companies that I just couldn't find and subsequently add to the pie. So hopefully this will be improved in time. But as an example, London was not showing up at all. And when I tried, for instance, London, I just wasn't getting the company listed. And equally, when I tried to go through the stocks, the dividends, I couldn't see the company listed there as well. So there's a problem with the search right now, but hopefully that'll be fixed in the future. And this is more of a feature request as well, but when I want to create a pie, I would much rather name the given pie first of all rather than add in the stocks straight away. As we saw earlier, I had to search for companies and then decide, but at least the way I treat these pies is that they are individual sectors, and so I want to, in my mind, think that I'm going to be invested in the technology sector first, rather than it being an afterthought. So a lot of these concerns that I have are just implementation issues, but nothing too much of an issue. So when we set up an individual pie, we then have to decide how we're going to be funding. And so, for instance, you can connect your bank account and the money is automatically sent into the given pie. But realistically, I just just want to have my money enter my account, and then from my account I can decide how much should be invested each month. And then in the future, when we have all the different pies that are weighted, then we can decide and say, hey, I want to invest £200 this month. 20% goes into finance, 10% into healthcare, etc. So this feature needs to be integrated a little bit more into the entire process. It's somewhat separate to the rest of the app right now. So hopefully in the future, these concerns can be dealt with. But with all the negatives out the way, it's really exciting to see this feature enabled for Trading212. I hope this causes other platforms out there to follow in a similar way. And I expect future updates will improve this entire process. So this feature is in beta at the moment. I expect this feature to be rolled out for everyone else in the future. So I'm curious, will you be changing your investment style so that it works with these pies, or will you be sticking to the standard individual investment style? So feel free to leave a comment in the section below, and with that said, I'll catch you in the next one.